In 1919, Germany lay in ruins, humiliated, divided, and searching for someone to blame. Amid the chaos, a failed artist from Austria discovered his true talent, not in painting, but in manipulating the masses. This is the story of how Adolf Hitler, through fear, propaganda, and opportunity, turned despair into dictatorship, and how an entire nation followed him into darkness. To understand how a man became a myth, we must return to the beginning. Munich, 1919.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, well, one of the most compelling, maybe terrifying, and certainly historically vital questions, really. How does a rootless, failed corporal, someone who basically started with nothing, become an absolute dictator in Germany in, what, just 14 years?
It's an astonishing time frame, isn't it? And we're opening up the archives on that period between 1919 and 1933. What our sources really reveal is that this wasn't some kind of accidental success story. Not at all.
No, it sounds much more calculated.
It was absolutely a strategic, high-stakes campaign. You've got political opportunism, sophisticated image manipulation, even a kind of theatrical performance, and all of it built on this foundation of profound national crisis.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to sort of extract those key pivots, the moments things could have gone differently, maybe?
Exactly. The pivots, the political opportunism, but also the societal enabling factors. What were the specific elements of this perfect storm that allowed Hitler to transform himself from, frankly, a nobody into the man holding absolute power?
Okay. And to really get a grip on that transformation, we probably need to set the scene first. Munich, 1919. It sounds like utter chaos.
Oh, it absolutely was. Germany's been defeated in the war, the Kaiser's gone, abdicated, and the new Weimar Republic is, well, it's struggling desperately for any kind of legitimacy.
And Munich itself is volatile.
Extremely. Picture it. February 1919, Munich was experiencing a genuine Bürgerkrieg, a civil war right there on the streets. You had radical communists fighting soldiers from the Reichswehr, the regular army, and also these extreme right-wing paramilitary groups, the Freikorps.
Wow. Just street battles.
Vicious street battles, a fight for the soul of Bavaria, really. And it's right into this incredibly volatile environment that our sources place the young Adolf Hitler, still just a corporal at this point.
And we know he was there, right? He attended that huge funeral procession for Kurt Eisner.
That's right. The murdered Bavarian prime minister, a socialist, and significantly of Jewish origin. 100,000 people turned out for that funeral, and Hitler was among them. A corporal who, after the war ended, felt completely, Enwurselt is the German word, rootless.
Adrift, basically.
Completely adrift. And his immediate goal, the sources really emphasize this, it was just survival.
Not ideology yet, just
Yeah.
staying afloat.
Pretty much. Pure political opportunism initially. He was doing everything he possibly could just to remain in the army because without that structure, without the paycheck, he was looking at immediate homelessness.
Right. He needed a roof over his head, a purpose.
Exactly. Shelter, purpose, direction. Society wasn't offering him much, so that desperation, that need to just belong somewhere, that became his initial political driver. It wasn't grand strategy yet, it was necessity.
Okay, so before we get to the beer hall orator we all picture, we need to understand the worldview he's bringing into this post-war chaos. And that takes us back further, doesn't it? Back to Vienna, around 1907.
Yeah, Vienna is crucial because Vienna, for him, was meant to be the launch pad, his big artistic career. He arrived there, 18 years old, full of himself, thinking he's this great aspiring artist.
But it didn't quite work out that way.
Not even close. Vienna delivered the first really big defeats of his life. He failed the entrance exam for the Academy of Fine Arts, not just once either.
Twice, wasn't it?
Twice, yeah. So his entire early adult life, right there, it's defined by this massive rejection of his artistic dreams, his self-image.
And yet he scrapes by somehow in this huge, bustling city.
He does. He survives by selling his artwork, believe it or not. Watercolors, postcards, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is where, as you say, the historical detail gets, well, paradoxical.
Because who was buying them?
It's quite stunning, actually. The sources confirm that the main people buying his work, the dealers who kept him financially afloat, were Jewish.
But wait, really? At that stage?
At that stage, yeah. And what's more, accounts from that time, they suggest he wasn't yet this virulent, obsessive anti-Semite we know later. There are even credible stories, anecdotes of him defending Jewish acquaintances against some of the anti-immigrant attacks that were common in Vienna then.
So the radical anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
that comes later. It's an ideological shift.
It seems to be, yes. It wasn't fully formed in Vienna. So the question then becomes, what was the lasting political lesson he took away from that difficult time?
Okay, what was it?
Well, it seems to be this intense hatred, this real contempt for democracy and parliamentary politics. He and his friend, August Kubitschek, they used to watch the debates in the Reichsrat, the Austrian parliament.
And that was chaotic.
Utterly chaotic. You had something like 30 different parties in there, German Austrians, Czechs, Poles, Italians, all arguing, often literally speaking in their own languages, trying to govern this crumbling Austro-Hungarian empire.
Sounds like a recipe for gridlock. Magnified.
Exactly. And for Hitler, watching this spectacle, it became the definition of weakness, of inefficiency, of just pure chaos. It left this incredibly strong negative impression on him.
So parlants are just talking shops.
That's how he saw them. Useless chatterboxes. Quatschbuden, I think was the term. Totally incapable of making the big necessary decisions. The early prejudice just cemented his belief that, real progress, real national salvation, that could only come from one strong individual, not from committees or voting.
Okay. So he comes back to Munich after the war. He's carrying this contempt for democracy. He's got the personal failure baggage. He's feeling rootless. How does the army then shape him, turn this stray dog, as Meyer called him, into a political force?
It happens remarkably quickly, actually. In 1919, the Reichswehr, the army, takes political control in Munich after crushing the communists. And Captain Karl Meyer, who's running an anti-communist propaganda unit, he spots something in this aimless corporal.
Potential, or just someone usable.
Maybe a bit of both. Meyer remembered him later famously as a stray dog looking for a master. But he brought him into his unit. And that gave Hitler everything he'd been missing. Structure, a clear ideology, the anti-communist nationalist line, and crucially, a stage, a purpose.
He becomes a spy and gets propaganda training.
A volunteer spy, yes. And he attends this propaganda schooling. But this wasn't just sitting in lectures. This was practical application. It was basically a laboratory for figuring out mass manipulation.
Testing messages, seeing what worked.
Precisely. He's immersed in this right-wing counter-narrative. The idea that Germany didn't lose the war militarily but was betrayed from within, the stab in the back myth, blaming Jewish people, communists.
He learns the talking points.
He learns them, but more importantly, he practices delivering them. He starts giving talks to other soldiers, testing the messages, watching how they react, seeing what gets a response, and he discovers he can hold their attention, he can command a room.
And his confidence grows.
Explodes, really. Through this process of testing, observing, getting feedback, he realizes, hey, I'm actually good at this. Politics, he starts to see, could be a very promising field for someone with his particular set of emerging rhetorical skills.
Okay, so that army training ground leads us right into the next crucial phase. The sources call it as political verpuum.
A cocooning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Verpung, like a larva transforming. Because in the spring of 1919, he's still described as ideologically kind of planless. He's soaking things up, looking for answers in these völkisch, these sort of ethnic nationalist circles.
Trying to make sense of the defeat, the chaos.
Yes. How did Germany lose? What kind of government should they have now? He's searching. But then, by the autumn of 1919, something clicks. This rapid, very focused ideological metamorphosis happens.
And what emerges from the cocoon? What emerges is this radical synthesis of ideas that had been floating around. He finds the framework that explains everything, the war defeat, the economic hardship, the political mess, and the shape that emerges is designed to be, well, universally explosive. It's a combination of radical, racist anti-Semitism.
Which we know wasn't fully formed in Vienna.
Right. Now it's crystallizing. Radical, racist anti-Semitism paired with virulent anti-capitalism.
Ah, okay. Why was that specific fusion anti-Semitism and anti-capitalism so important for the Nazi movement's success later on?
Well, think about it. It allowed them to target enemies, perceived enemies, right across the political spectrum. The völkisch nationalism, the racial stuff that appealed to the traditional right wing, the army officers, the old aristocracy, conservative middle classes.
Okay.
But the anti-capitalism, or at least the pseudo-socialism, using the language of the left, that was a powerful magnet for workers who felt betrayed by the traditional socialist parties, for farmers drowning in debt, small shopkeepers terrified of big department stores.
So you create this enemy that's everywhere.
Exactly. The enemy becomes this convenient, monstrous hybrid, the Jewish Bolshevist capitalist conspiracy. It meant Hitler could stand against Wall Street and Moscow seemingly at the same time. It broadened the appeal massively.
And we see this shift reflected in his writing almost immediately. Autumn 1919. The anti-Semitism becomes really explicit, really violent.
Oh, absolutely. This is the point where he formally declares Jewish people to be the greatest threat. And it's not just political opposition. He defines them in purely racial, biological terms, calling them the racial tuberculosis of the peoples.
Yeah, it's killing language.
It is. And it's not just rhetoric. It leads directly to his demand for the removal of Jews altogether, total societal cleansing. And it's really important to note how quickly this language escalated. By the early 1920s, just a year or two later, he was already saying publicly that the best thing would be to hang all Jews in Germany until none were left.
So the exterminationist thinking, it's there right from the start of his political career.
It appears so, yes. The seeds are absolutely there from the very beginning. It wasn't something that developed much later. It was foundational.
Okay, the ideology is hardening. Now he needs the vehicle, the apparatus. And he finds in this tiny little group, right, the German Workers' Party, the DAP, meeting in a pub.
Yeah, the Sternecker Bro. And for Hitler, joining this tiny right-wing extremist group, this was his moment, his validation. He finally found a place, small as it was, where his radical, aggressive ideas weren't laughed at or dismissed. They were cheered enthusiastically.
He found his audience.
He found his first true political home. And that immediate acceptance, that cheering, it just fueled his belief that he had this unique destiny. His importance within the DAP just skyrocketed almost immediately.
And then just months later, February 1920, he's taking center stage at the Hofbräuhaus. Big beer hall.
Huge event for them. He unveils the new platform, announces the renaming to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, and presents this 25-point program to about 2,000 people.
And that program, was it coherent or more that strategic mix?
Definitely the strategic mix. A masterpiece of political contradiction, really. Full of völkisch nationalist demands, but also that strong dash of anti-capitalism we talked about.
Yeah.
But the core concept tying it all together was the demand for this Volksgemeinschaft.
The people's community.
Right. This idealized vision of a unified German society, free of class struggle, where all true Germans, the Volk, would be reconciled and work together. Sounds nice, doesn't it?
Superficially, maybe. But there's always a catch with these things.
Oh, massive catch. Because, by definition, the Volksgemeinschaft explicitly excluded anyone defined as an enemy. Jews, communists, Democrats, anyone not fitting the narrow racial and political definition. So it was a promise of inclusion built entirely on the principle of exclusion. Very clever, very dangerous.
And Hitler understood, even then, that this wasn't just about policy points on paper. It had to be visual. Emotional. He takes over advertising, designs the flag.
He knew instinctively that the visual identity was essential. He became head of advertising. The flag design, the black hakenkreuz, the swastika, which they claimed symbolized the higher race, set against the red for socialism and white for nationalism.
Deliberately playing with contradictions again.
Absolutely. Harnessing these emotionally charged colors and symbols to create excitement, tension, but also this promise of eventual total unification within their exclusive Volksgemeinschaft. It's like he was trying to shape the world visually, maybe making up for the failed art career in a way.
And the sources make a really interesting connection here, don't they? Between this political stagecraft and his earlier experiences, specifically with Wagner.
Yes, Richard Wagner's operas. This connection seems profound. Back in Vienna, apparently, Hitler was just completely overwhelmed by Wagner's music dramas.
The scale of them.
The scale, the powerful music, the myths, the tragic heroes, the opulent staging, the whole experience just demanded your total attention, your emotional submission. You were swept away.
And he saw politics could do the same.
He seems to have realized that political performance should be like that. He basically transferred the aesthetic of the Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work of art, from the opera stage to the political rally.
Politics as theater.
Exactly. The goal became a perfected political performance, something that would capture the audience completely, bypass their rational thought, and hit them with pure emotion, pathos, mass suggestion, dramatic staging.
We see that later with the huge rallies, right? The lights, the banners.
All of it. Giant banners, meticulously organized crowds, precise timing for effect, building this intense emotional crescendo. It's an approach the Nazis perfected later with Nuremberg and so on. He went from being a penniless guy in the cheap seats at the Opera House to being the director and star performer of this huge national political spectacle.
But back in 1920, the director is still, well, broke, destitute, maybe even using soup kitchens. No professional training. This grand vision needs money. It needs connections.
Absolutely critical. His rise is frankly unthinkable without that early financial backing and, just as importantly, social acceptance from certain circles.
Yeah.
And this is where Dietrich Eckart becomes so important.
Who was he?
Eckart was this kind of volatile bohemian figure, a journalist, an opium addict apparently, and a really fanatical Jew hater. But he recognized Hitler's raw talent.
His ability to work a crowd.
Exactly. His demagogic power. Eckart saw this potential and became Hitler's crucial early mentor. He understood that this raw speaker could be polished, funded, and aimed like a weapon.
And Eckart had the connections. He could open doors.
He served as the bridge. He introduced the beer hall agitator into Munich's upper crust, into high society. People like Elsa Bruckmann, Helene Bechstein, wife of the famous piano maker, wealthy, influential patrons.
And why did they back him? What was in it for them?
Well, these were people, often from the educated upper class, who despised the Weimar Republic. They hated the democracy, felt Germany had been humiliated. Their investment, you could say, was pretty cynical. They saw Hitler as this political battering ram.
A tool.
A protege, maybe, who could inject their shared desire making Germany great again, basically into the masses, into the common people. This patronage gave him money, obviously, but it also gave him a crucial layer of legitimacy. It funded the party machine as it started to grow. Without their checkbooks early on, the NSDAP might have just fizzled out as another tiny fringe group.
Okay, so the vision is funded, the ideology is taking shape, and then external events just keep throwing fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
But the Versailles Treaty comes into force in 1920. Instant national outrage, right?
Oh, universally hated. The war guilt clause, the massive reparations demanded, it was a gift to agitators like Hitler. He seized on it immediately, recognized it as a fantastic propaganda instrument.
Even if his actual economic impact wasn't quite as bad as claimed initially?
Exactly. The sources suggest that in those early years, its direct economic impact, maybe it wasn't the single devastating factor people often think. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the psychological power, the symbolic weight. It was the perfect scapegoat.
He could blame everything on Versailles.
Everything, every economic problem, every national humiliation, every shortage. He could blame the treaty, and crucially, blame the democratic politicians who signed it, the November criminals. It allowed him to just externalize all of Germany's suffering onto this one hated document and the traitors at home.
And his reputation is growing now. By mid-1920, he's known in Munich as this Volkstribun, this People's Tribune.
Yes, the beer hall agitator. Let's dig into that rhetorical style, because the sources paint this picture of someone absolutely mesmerizing, but also kind of physically exhausting to watch.
How so?
Well, it was total immersion theater, wasn't it? People would pay money to stand for 3, maybe 4 hours, packed into a smoky beer hall, listening to this guy speak without a microphone.
Incredible stamina.
And his style. It was characterized by this huge, dramatic vocal range. He could go from these guttural whispers drawing people in to suddenly exploding in these hysterical spitting screams, highly visual, too wild gestures, pacing, really working the crowd, using humor sometimes, call and response.
Why did that connect so powerfully, do you think, in that specific time and place?
Because he cultivated this image of absolute authenticity. People didn't see a polished, detached politician reading notes. They felt they were seeing a man speaking from his innermost conviction, someone driven by this righteous, almost divine rage on behalf of the German people.
Not a paid parrot, as the source says.
Exactly. Not some hired mouthpiece. They saw him as one of them, just saying what they were all feeling, railing against the betrayals, the elites, the perceived enemies. That raw emotional connection was key. It made him unique in German politics at that time.
And the powerful rhetoric was soon backed up by something else. Organized force. The SA, the Sturmabteilung, founded late 1920.
Yes, the stormtroopers. And we need to be clear, the SA wasn't just some group providing security at meetings. It was conceived as a paramilitary army, designed for political terror and for propaganda through action.
So, presented maybe as a sports club initially, but the real purpose was intimidation.
Unambiguously intimidation. The goal, stated pretty openly, was smashing the heads of the opponents. breaking up rival meetings, street brawls, targeted assaults.
So violence becomes a form of communication.
Absolutely. Every fight, every disrupted socialist meeting, every brutal attack, it generated press. It got attention. Violence was the propaganda. It sent a clear signal to the whole Weimar system. The war isn't over. It's continuing right here as a civil war.
Us versus them.
NS movement versus Jews, communists, Democrats. Total conflict. And this brutality, sadly, was highly attractive to a lot of people. Disillusioned war veterans, young men craving action, purpose, belonging. The essay offered all of that.
And the sources point to Coburg, October 1922, as the really clear early example of the strategy in action, perfecting the language of violence.
Coburg is seen as a pivotal moment, yes, a real escalation. Hitler takes about 600 SA men to this gathering, supposedly a quiet traditional event, and essentially marches into the city like an invading force. They deliberately provoke and engage in pitched street battles with opponents.
This wasn't just random brawling.
No, it seems quite calculated. It was a deliberate demonstration, a show of force designed to prove that the Nazis were willing and able to use physical terror to challenge the state's monopoly on violence right there in the open. And it worked. In terms of publicity and projecting strength, that one incident really showed how quickly this group was evolving into a disciplined, intimidating paramilitary force. It grew rapidly after that.
And all this is happening against this backdrop of just escalating national disaster. 1923, that's the peak crisis year, isn't it?
An absolute nightmare year for Germany. You've got the French and Belgian occupation of the Ruhr industrial region, leading to passive resistance, economic paralysis, and then a real catastrophe, hyperinflation.
Just impossible to grasp the scale of it today.
It really is. Prices changing literally by the hour. People needing wheelbarrows full of worthless banknotes just to buy basic groceries. Life savings, pensions, the entire financial stability of the middle class just annihilated. Wiped out.
And government looks helpless.
Completely helpless. The state seemed utterly incapable of dealing with the crisis. And that universal despair, that vacuum of authority and hope, it created the perfect fertile ground for someone offering radical, simple solutions.
Enter Hitler with his aggressive answers and that vision of the strong, unified Volksgemeinschaft.
And it found an audience, a much bigger audience now. NSDAP membership in Bavaria alone apparently grew tenfold just in 1923, up to around 55,000. People were desperate for any vision of a future, any promise of order, even a radical, violent one.
And right at the height of this economic chaos, he gets this huge symbolic boost from the cultural elite.
Yes, the Wagner connection deepens. The Wagner clan validation in Beirut.
Beirut, the home of the Wagner Festival.
Exactly. September 1923. He's introduced, again by the Bechsteins, his patrons, to Siegfried Wagner, Richard Wagner's son, and crucially, Siegfried's wife, Winifred.
And Winifred was impressed.
Apparently very taken with him. His modest appearance, his intensity. This meeting was symbolically immense. It placed the beer hall agitator, the street-fighting demagogue, right into the highest circles of German cultural nationalism. The educated upper class. He wasn't just some Bavarian fringe politician anymore. He was being acknowledged, validated by German cultural royalty.
That validation, that growing support, it leads almost inevitably to the next step, doesn't it? The beer hall push. November 1923. Which fails dramatically.
A complete disaster, militarily and strategically. They march on the Feldherrn Hall in Munich. There's a confrontation with the police, shots fired. It collapses very quickly. We even have that detail from the sources, right? A bullet missed Hitler by just centimeters. Could have ended very differently.
He's arrested. It looks like the end of the road.
It should have been. But this is where Hitler performs maybe his most brilliant act of political self-creation. The failure doesn't crush him. He flips it.
Through the trial.
He uses the treason trial, February 1924, as a national stage. It's pure political theater. He doesn't really defend himself in a legal sense. He attacks the state, attacks the republic.
Takes responsibility, but frames it differently.
Exactly. He claims full responsibility for the putsch, not as an admission of guilt, but as proof of his burning patriotism. He argues he only intended the best for Germany, wanted to save it, and was only foiled by betrayal and weakness.
And the trial gets huge publicity.
Germany-wide publicity. Suddenly, everyone knows who Adolf Hitler is. He goes from being this, failed Bavarian regional politician to becoming the central figure in the narrative of the savior of Germany. He completely dominates the proceedings, eclipses established figures like General Ludendorff, who was also involved.
And the sentence for high treason. Pretty light, wasn't it?
Absurdly light. 5 years fortress confinement, but served in relative comfort at Landsberg Fortress, and with the understanding he'd be eligible for early parole very quickly.
So Landsberg wasn't exactly hard time?
Not at all. It was less like a prison, more like a political retreat for a leader in waiting. He received a constant stream of visitors, admirers, wealthy patrons, powerful figures. They basically reinforce his own belief in his singular destiny, his mission to rule Germany.
And it's there he writes Mein Kampf.
Correct. And Mein Kampf itself is crucial. It's not just a political manifesto laying out his ideas. It's also a carefully constructed piece of propaganda disguised as this idealized autobiography.
He's inventing his own myth, creating that perfect projection surface you mentioned.
He literally is. He strategically reconstructs his whole life story, all his failures, the Vienna Academy rejection, being a rootless corporal. They're reframed, valorized. They become his apprenticeship years, necessary trials that Providence set for him.
Even the war experience.
Reinterpreted as his fiery baptism, the crucible that forged the coming leader. And alongside this invented personal narrative, he lays out his core ideology in brutal detail. The world as this eternal racial struggle, Aryans destined to win, the Jew as the eternal enemy, the absolute bottom. He's giving the public and his followers this heroic, usable narrative that reinforces his own belief and theirs in his almost divine mission.
So he's released early, December 1924. So it was just 9 months. And now the strategy shifts, right? He's committed to gaining power legally through the system he despises.
That's the decision made in Landsberg. The putsch failed. Violence alone wasn't enough. The new path is to build the party across the entire Reich, use elections, undermine the Republic from within. He immediately pushes for the NSDAP's reorganization.
But alongside the organizing, the image becomes even more critical now, doesn't it? Controlling not just the words, but the pictures.
Absolutely essential. And this is where Heinrich Hoffmann, who'd been his main photographer since about 1920, becomes absolutely indispensable to the whole project.
Hoffmann crafts the Hitler brand.
You could say that. Hoffmann was the architect of this new kind of political visual culture. Think about it. Before him, politicians usually appeared stiff, formal, distant in photos. Hoffmann completely revolutionized that. He popularized these new types of political ads for the illustrated magazines, which were huge back then.
The photos we still see everywhere. The seemingly candid shots.
Exactly. The action shots, Hitler mid-speech, looking dynamic, the home stories, Hitler with dogs, with children, looking thoughtfully over maps at his mountain retreat. They presented him as this approachable, energetic, modern alternative to the, frankly, old and tired Weimar politicians.
These weren't just photos, they were adverts.
Werbebotschaften.
Precisely. Advertising messages, carefully crafted, flooding the public sphere via these popular illustrated magazines. And this visual propaganda was incredibly effective. And, the sources note, highly profitable too. It apparently made both Hoffmann, the photographer, and Hitler, the subject, millionaires by the late 1920s. While he's building this public image, he's also dealing with internal party politics, right? There was a split in 1926. With Goebbels involved.
Yes, a serious internal challenge. There was this faction in the Northwest, led by figures like Gregor Strasser and including the young, ambitious Joseph Goebbels. They were pushing for a much stronger socialist, anti-capitalist direction for the party. They saw the Munich leadership, Hitler's base, as too conservative, too bourgeois.
How did Hitler handle that? Could have split the party.
He handled it very shrewdly. The source actually credits him with very high social intelligence in this moment. He didn't immediately crush the dissent. He let the conflict simmer, allowed debates about abstract principles, and then decisively steered the party back towards his absolute authority. But the real masterstroke was how he dealt with Goebbels.
He didn't purge him.
No. He recognized Goebbels' immense talent, his radicalism, his energy, his rhetorical skill. He saw the potential. So instead of making him an enemy, Hitler actively courted him, won him over personally, and turned this potential rival into one of his most crucial, unconditionally loyal supporters for the rest of his life.
That ability to inspire or command that kind of intense personal loyalty seems key to the whole Führer cult.
It absolutely was. You can't just command loyalty like that. It has to be cultivated through charisma, through reward, through making people feel part of something special, something historic. And this shift towards the absolute Führer cult was really solidified at the Weimar Party Congress in 1926.
Weimar, symbolically important place. What happened there?
That Congress marks the decisive moment where it becomes clear. Hitler's will alone determines the party's direction. No more internal democracy, no real debate within the NSDAP. His word is law.
And reinforced with rituals.
Yes. These quasi-religious rituals became increasingly important, designed to build fervor, unity, obedience. Like the ceremony for consecrating new party flags by having them touch the so-called Blutfahne, the blood flag.
The flag carried during the failed 1923 putsch, supposedly stained with blood.
That's the one. Treated like a sacred relic. Touching the new flags to it symbolized this continuity of struggle, this commitment to sacrifice, to violence if necessary. It reinforced this idea that Hitler was leading not just a political party, but a sacred, almost mystical movement chosen by fate.
And while he's building this mass base, the elite connections continue. The Wagner relationship persists.
It does. Winifred Wagner remains a key supporter, providing vital social links and probably financial help too. It's fascinating, though, that the sources mention Hitler sometimes seemed a bit uncertain around her.
Really? How so?
It suggests that maybe she and others in that elite inner circle weren't just sycophants. They perhaps still saw him partly as their political investment, someone they needed to guide, maybe even control subtly. But the mutual benefit was clear. Hitler brought renewed fame and state support to the Wagner Festival in Bayreuth, and Winifred provided him with crucial social legitimacy and access.
So by the late 1920s, the NSDAP isn't just this cult of personality, it's becoming a serious electoral machine.
A highly effective one. Their strategy was built on ubiquitous presence and using modern campaigning techniques, especially compared to the older parties. They realized early on they couldn't just win in the big cities.
So they went rural.
Heavily focused on the countryside, yes. Deploying speakers constantly into the smallest towns, villages, often in Protestant regions that felt overlooked by Berlin. They made residents feel taken seriously for the first time, perhaps.
And it worked.
It started getting real traction. By 1928, in some of these rural districts, they were already polling up to 20% of the vote. Significant inroads. And then Coburg, remember Coburg?
The scene of the SA battles in 22.
Exactly. In 1929, Coburg became the first German city where the Nazis actually won a municipal majority, a real breakthrough, showing their strategy was working.
But the final catastrophic element, the thing that really allows them to ignite nationally, that's the global crisis, isn't it? The Wall Street crash, October 1929.
That changes everything. The crash plunges Germany, which was heavily reliant on American loans, into renewed existential poverty. The Great Depression hits Germany harder than almost anywhere else.
The numbers are staggering.
They are. Over 50,000 businesses bankrupt. Economic output drops by something like 40%. Unemployment skyrockets eventually towards 6, maybe 7 million people out of work. This absolute catastrophe, this profound national despair. It was the fuel that the NSDAP's constant agitation, their relentless attacks on the system, finally needed to truly ignite.
And this economic crisis leads to political polarization, pushes people to extremes.
Fatal polarization, yes. You see the Communist Party also gaining strength rapidly after 1929, feeding on the misery. And this forces many moderate middle-class voters into making this stark, terrifying choice.
Communism or Nazism?
Essentially, yes. They saw the political center collapsing, the traditional parties failing. They felt trapped between what they saw as a Bolshevik future, which terrified them, and this aggressive nationalist Nazi future. And many centrist voters, out of fear of communism, were driven towards Hitler as the perceived lesser of two evils, or maybe even as the only force strong enough to stop the communists.
And the electoral results just keep climbing.
Dramatically. September 1930 election, they become the second strongest party in the Reichstag. Huge shock. Then, by the summer of 1932, they are clearly the strongest party by a significant margin.
And the propaganda machine is in full swing, contrasting Hitler with the old guard.
Relentlessly. The image propaganda hammers this contrast. You've got the old, tired Weimar politicians symbolized by the aging 80-year-old President Hindenburg, and then there's Hitler, marketed as this young force, energetic, dynamic.
The simple soldier from the people.
That narrative again, just a corporal Iron Cross winner, one of the people, understands their suffering. This carefully staged mix of youthfulness, energy, common origin, the idea he's like you, but also destined to lead. It was incredibly potent propaganda.
And all the while, the SA street violence is continuing, getting worse.
Yes, escalating, systematically undermining the state. The SA, often clashing violently with communists, is constantly challenging the government's authority, its monopoly on force. When the democratic state seems unable, or maybe unwilling, to stop the street fighting, to maintain order, it loses public trust. It looks weak.
The state looks like the loser.
In the eyes of many Drummonds, yes. The state appeared to be failing, losing control, and that just paved the way further for the man who promised to restore order, albeit through brutality and dictatorship.
So end of 1932, Hitler leads the strongest party, but he doesn't have an absolute majority. His legal path seems stalled. How does he finally get the chancellorship? What's the final maneuver?
The final step wasn't really Hitler's own maneuver, ironically. It came down purely to infighting and miscalculation among the old conservative elites. He benefited massively from this bitter rivalry between the current chancellor, General Kurt von Schleicher, and his predecessor, Franz von Papen.
Papen wanted back in.
Desperately. Papen had been ousted by Schleicher, and he saw a chance to get revenge and return to power. So he goes to President Hindenburg, who deeply distrusted Hitler, and proposes a deal.
The deal to make Hitler chancellor?
Exactly. Papen's plan, or his pitch to Hindenburg, was appoint Hitler chancellor but surround him with conservative ministers. Give the Nazis only a few cabinet posts. Papen himself would be vice-chancellor. The idea was they could control him, tame him, use his popular support for their own conservative agenda.
The ultimate underestimation.
A profound, cynical, and ultimately catastrophic failure by the old guard to understand the man they were dealing with. His ruthlessness, his unshakable will to absolute power, as the sources put it. They thought they could use this demagogue as a puppet. They completely failed to see that his entire 14-year campaign, from the beer halls to Mein Kampf to the mass rallies, was aimed at total, not shared, control.
And Hindenburg agrees. January 30th, 1933.
Hindenburg appoints Hitler Chancellor of Germany. This cynical man of violence, this obsessive Jew hater, comes to power through entirely legal means, handed the keys by the very elites who thought they could manipulate him.
And the celebration, the torchlight procession.
Through the Brandenburg Gate, yes. A massively staged spectacle, affirming the triumph of this meticulously managed 14-year campaign of manipulation, opportunism, and harnessing national despair. #outro.
So looking back over this whole deep dive, the sources really suggested this catastrophic rise. It needed two core ingredients, didn't it? Mixing together over those 14 years.
It seems so. First, you absolutely needed the external factors. The tragic, humiliating defeat in World War I, the psychological scar that left, the inherent weaknesses and institutional decay of the Weimar Republic, and of course those relentless economic crises, the hyperinflation, the Ruhr occupation, and then the final hammer blow of the global depression. These things created this perfect vacuum of despair and anger.
The fertile ground.
Exactly. But the ground needed the right seed, and that was the second ingredient. Hitler's own specific attributes, his almost messianic, unshakable self-belief, his undeniable speaking skill, that redetailing, and maybe most critically, as we discussed, his chameleon-like ability to become the perfect projection surface.
Reflecting back whatever people wanted to see.
Reflecting the hopes, the fears, the prejudices, the sheer desperation of millions of Germans who were just yearning for simple answers, for scapegoats, and for a promise, any promise, of renewed national greatness.
And it's important to stress, isn't it, the element of complicity? The sources are clear. The Germans weren't just seduced passively.
Not at all. That's far too simple. Many, many Germans actively hoped for, actively voted for, a leader exactly like Hitler. Someone who promised to tear down the old system, restore national pride, deal harshly with perceived enemies. They believed his aggressive, simplistic solutions would fix their complex, overwhelming problems. It wasn't just manipulation, it was also, for many, a conscious choice.
So that transformation from the stray dog corporal to the Führer, it really was a masterclass in construction, using everything available.
Everything. Carefully crafted literature like Mein Kampf to build the myth, unprecedented use of photography through Hoffmann to create the image, organized violence via the essay to project strength and intimidate opponents, and that critical, self-serving patronage from figures like Bechstein and Wagner to provide funds and legitimacy. It was a total performance designed from the ground up to transform personal failure and national disaster into this narrative of inescapable destiny.
Which leaves us, I suppose, with a pretty unsettling final thought for you, our listeners, to consider.
It is unsettling. When political theater is staged with such skill, such visual and rhetorical perfection, and when the chaos and uncertainty of the world make people truly desperate for a simple, strong, unifying story, does the audience really distinguish between the performance and the reality anymore?
Or do they just end up voting for the best actor, the one offering the most potent, most compelling illusion?